could you steal the show again at Sundance, like an auction, and then saying psych?
I could. I did that.
Wait, was that your idea, Jay? Because
no.
that is actually has to go down in the Guinness Book of World Records as one of the funniest things, and nobody, I don't think, can pull that off again.
I didn't even know about it. I was with him the whole time, weeks coming up to it. I didn't know that that's what was going to happen. And so I had my money ready and stuff. I was like, I want it. But
yeah, there was a moment, ladies and gentlemen, back in 2011, Sundance 2011, where I reached a point where I think, honestly, now in retrospect, I just ran out of shit to say. My whole life I've been doing stuff like pulling from my real life. I'm not really a writer, I'm barely a director. What I used to do is kind of take shit from, I used to work at a convenience store. I fell in love with a girl who was like way more sexually experienced than me. I grew up Catholic. So that's where like Clerks, Chasing Amy, Dogma come from. So I never made flicks as much as I would just like rip out chunks of my heart, throw it on 2 platters, project it, and be like, what do you think? Do you get it? It's kind of like blogging as cinema. So all those fucking critics who were like, he's no filmmaker, I'm always like, they're right, I'm not. So, you know, for years that's what I did, and I stripped mine my entire fucking life. Like everything I had done up until the age of 23, which is when I made Clerks, was open season, and that's what fueled me. And then after that, I stopped living a life in general because suddenly I was living a fantasy life now. I used to be in the real world. And one day Miramax picked up Clerks, and all of a sudden after that, it was like dreams come true every fucking day. Even my worst day is better than I ever imagined it ever would have been and stuff. So it's just this like wonderful roller coaster that started and kept going, but at a certain point, I ran out of shit to talk about because I ran out of all that material, interesting things and real life things that happened to me before I started making films. So I think I just kind of reached a place where I was like, the only filmmaker I ever knew how to be was the one that was like, I worked in a convenience store, so I'm gonna make a movie about working in a convenience store. Like I was Catholic, so I'm gonna make a movie about being Catholic. Very experiential type stuff. So when I was done strip mining, I had nothing left to say, and I was like forced to look into my current real life. At the end of the day, what would I have been talking about? Like, oh, the problems of being a filmmaker who's made 6 movies. You know, it's just not very interesting anymore. So instead, I just kind of walked away. I was also very frustrated with marketing at the point, because we had made Clerks 2, it cost $5 million to make. Cost $10 million to sell it because of commercials, marketing, TV, newspapers, which isn't even much at this point. But the marketing costs double what the creative costs were, and that bugged the shit out of me because I'm like, I could have used $10 million to make a better movie. I could have paid people that I would be like, please do this for free, you know, because I'm to do it as a favor for me. And you know, after years of doing that, some people be like, look, I do the favor for you, but the other people make all the fucking money, dude. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. But you know, after begging people to do shit inexpensively, and then trying to bring the movie in on budget or under budget and shit, being responsible, handing it over, and then watching them to spend double the cost of the movie to sell the movie. Like, that made no sense to me. Is that me? Made no sense to me. I got frustrated by that, and I saw that coming for this movie Red State, which we made for like $4 million and shit. In order to get it out to the world, they would have spent 20 if we went to a studio. So I was just like, I can't do it. It's madness at this point. Like, I didn't get into it to watch the costs of marketing escalate. And also, like, I was big on social media, so I figured I could reach my audience through there. Why spend that money to get to people who aren't necessarily going to go? Like, I remember it all. This took root when Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back was coming out. It was a studio, our largest movie at that point with Miramax, become quasi-studio at that point, the Dimension side of Miramax. So my mom calls me one day, and she goes, oh, Tiger, I just saw a commercial for your new movie, the one where you run around with Jay a lot. And I go, that's how she thinks of it. She never remembers the title. She's like, the black and white one, the lesbian one, the Catholic one. So she's like, I just saw the one where you did the commercial for the one you and Jay ran around. I said, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, excellent. Where'd you see the commercial? She goes, Lifetime. I said, Lifetime for women? And she's like, is there one for men? And I was like, I wish there was, because that'd make a lot more sense to do a commercial for Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back on fucking Lifetime. So I went and found out like what the commercial costs to go on Lifetime. $25,000. Now, you know, in the movie world, that's not a bunch, but like, we made Clerks for $27,000. So the idea of spending $25,000 to advertise to my mother, who was going anyway, and everyone else who saw that commercial on Lifetime, I guarantee you we didn't pick up a single extra fucking person. And that's not going like, women don't like comedies. Women don't like bad comedies. So, you know, at the end of the day, I was like, what a waste of fucking money. Like, that's where marketing started to bug me. So at that point, with having like almost nothing to say, left personal, and that being the only filmmaker I knew how to be, and the marketing costs fucking bugging me after nearly, I don't know, at that point it was probably 15 years of doing it or something, I was like, I got to do it a different way. Like I had to reinvent it for myself. And there was a moment in Clerks 2 where the clerks at the end, they buy the quick stuff. Favorite moment in one of my movies, and one of my all-time favorite moments in movies in general, which is gross to say because I made it, but still, I love it because there's a moment where they're in a jail scene in the end, they're trying to figure out, like having an argument about how all shit went wrong, and Dante's coming up in Randall's face, and he's just like, what would you do if you were the big man in charge making all the decisions? Tell me how you would do, what you would do to change your life, what would the great Randall Graves do that I wouldn't do? And Randall, and I'm butchering my own dialogue. And Randall goes, I'd buy a quick stop and reopen it myself. It's one of my favorite moments in the movie because that character would never say that. That's akin to that character going, I have dreams. And where we come from, you don't say that. You never fucking said something like, I want to be a filmmaker. Because then people are like, why? You think you're better than me? And shit like that. You were never encouraged to try. We come from a world, I mean, I can't speak for him, but my fucking father was the kind of guy that's like, see that mountain? Never climb it, Too fucking hard. Somebody will send you a letter about what it's like. And so we were never really encouraged to reach for more or anything like that. And then one day, suddenly, there we were in the world of more. So at a certain point, I just kind of walked away from it just because I wanted to see if, like, I could do something else. I wanted to talk. We went to podcasting for a while, and that's all I did. And when I was away, I realized, I just got to a place where I had nothing to say, but I had actually skills to make a movie. Like, I was not good at making movies in the beginning. It was weird. I had no skills of making a movie, but I had a lot to say. And then midway through my career, a little halfway point, past the midway point, I had nothing left to say, but I had the ability to make a movie. Like Malcolm Gladwell says, 10,000 hours make you fucking good at anything. I tried not to be good at filmmaking, and just over the course of years, you just get better at how to tell a story visually and stuff. So it was kind of weird and ironic, and then I was like, I'm going to go do a podcast, because I like talking, obviously, I like the sound of my own voice. So from the podcast, we were talking about this one episode, Smodcast 259, and it's an episode we call The Walrus and the Carpenter. It was based on this internet story, went around for a month, about a guy who had went to a website in the UK, kind of like a Craigslist website, and was offering a room for rent for any potential lodgers. And the letter, normally a listing like that is 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, very simple and shit. This was written like an epic poem almost. And it was a guy telling a story about how he lived a big, long, storied life at sea, including a time when he was lost at sea for 6 months with only a walrus as a companion, who he nicknamed Gregory. And he was like, those were the sweetest times of my life, and I miss this walrus every day since I've come back to the land. And you're reading this ad going like, oh my God, it's fucking heartbreaking. Like, he misses his walrus. And you're like, where's it going? And then you get to where it's going, man. He said, so I offer you a room for rent free of charge. You have the whole run of the house. All I ask is this. I have been for some time constructing a very realistic walrus costume. So for 2 hours every day, he wanted the lodger to dress up like a walrus. And he said, when you're dressed as the walrus, you're not allowed to talk like a human being, you only make walrus noises, and I will throw you fish and crabs. He said, we won't do it every day, but when we do it, minimum 2 hours every day. You can have the run of a mansion, just don't go near my bedroom or my workshop. And at that point, you're like, who the fuck wants to go near that workshop? So we're on Smodcast, and one of the podcasts I do with another friend of mine, Scott Mosier. We're sitting there talking about this. We didn't know it was a hoax. We found out later on it was a hoax written by a guy in Brighton, England, and immediately I got in touch with him. I was like, dude, welcome to my world. So on the podcast, I'm sitting there talking about it with Scott Mosier. We're making fun of it, having a good time. I was like, this is like the human centipede, man. You're gonna show up, this guy's gonna fucking knock you out, sew you into a walrus costume, you could become the human walrus. And then as we're talking, we start making jokes and shit, and I'm sitting there going like, this sounds like an excellent movie, man. Like, I would want to see this movie. And I'm like, copyright Kevin Scott. Somebody's got to make this movie. Now, you can listen to the podcast. It happens over the course of the episode. You hear us, me and Scott, talking about and having a good time, bullshitting around. Then we start making up a movie about it, and that's what we do on the show, and I'm still having a good fucking time. Mosier is still kind of doing what we do in every episode, but at one point you hear my mind snap, and that's only ever happened one time in my life. Back when I was 21, I saw Richard Linklater's film Slacker. I'm watching that movie, and I was like, fuck, man, like, this is film? Like, this counts? This don't take place in New York? We're fucking Los Angeles, ain't no movie stars. Like, I don't know any of these people. It takes place in Bumblefuck, Texas. It was Austin. I didn't know what that was. As a product of the New Jersey educational system, I didn't know Austin was capital Texas and all that shit. But anyway, so I was like, if this kid in Austin could fucking do it, maybe I could do it in Bumblefuck, New Jersey, which was where I lived at the time. Highlands, technically, Highlands, New Jersey. So, that made me fucking dream. And there was a moment where, I realized I've been watching movies my whole life. I'm a big comedy fan. One of my favorite comedies of all time, Animal House. And I love the deltas. I realized I love anti-establishmental comedy. Sometimes I have to sound it out for myself. I love like anybody taking on the system, and that's what like that movie was for sure. But at a certain point, I didn't identify with those characters. Like as much as I love the Rebels of Delta House, in one scene they accidentally kill a horse, and I was like, ew, because I would never do that. The comedy would end right there. It would be another hour of us going, how did we kill that horse? So for me, there was always a break. Like I love comedies, but I never saw me and my friends. Like I didn't see people sitting around talking about other movies. That's all we ever did. Nobody talking about Star Wars. Nobody talking about getting laid and shit like that. Nobody talking about male sexual insecurity, like fucking being upset that a girlfriend had a boyfriend before you and shit like that. So I didn't see me and my friends represented. And for years I was like, God, why won't someone make a movie about me and my friends? And then one day it fucking snapped in my head where I was like, nobody is ever gonna make a movie about you and your fucking friends. Why would they? They have no idea who you are. They have no idea you're so fucking special. If they're special, why don't you make a movie about you and your friends? The only person remotely interested in this movie about you and your friends is fucking you. So I was like, all right, and that's what Clerks was. And that changed my fucking life, gave me everything. Took me out of a convenience store in New Jersey, brought me around the entire fucking globe. I've done things that I couldn't have imagined I would have done. I've done shit that my parents blow their fucking hair back and shit. Like just, and I'm not talking like 3 ways with dudes, although that shocked them. But I'm just talking about like just like doing shit like no Smith was ever meant to go as far as I did and shit. So every day it's like magic and fucking wonder, man. Like, cause all I wanted to do was make this movie Clerks so we could show people, we know how to make a movie, please give us money for the next movie. And that's exactly what happened, but times it by 1,000. And everything changed instantly overnight and shit. So that happened because of the one moment where I was like, nobody's ever gonna make this fucking movie except you. So years later, I'm on this podcast, and you can hear it in my voice, you can hear it when I'm talking. There's a snap again. Second time in my life. It took 20 years to have another fucking snap and shit. And suddenly there's a snap, because I'm going, why won't somebody make this, man? Some filmmaker's gotta make this movie. I wanna see a movie about a guy who tries to turn another guy into a walrus, man. Who the fuck's gonna make that movie? And then I suddenly start thinking, like, you used to be a filmmaker. Maybe you can make this movie. And I realized that nobody is ever gonna make that movie. And you can hear me, I'm in love with the idea. I'm like, I would fucking kill to see that movie. That sounds amazing. Like, that's fucked up because it captures people's imagination, right? You say, this guy trying to turn a guy into a horse, you're like, that's fucking dumb. If you hear a walrus, you're like, this guy trying to turn this guy into a walrus? That's fucking dumb, but I'm interested. How do you do that? What does that look like? So I fell in love with the idea, and I was like, nobody's ever gonna do this, man. If you want to see this movie, do it yourself. And so for the first time in like 3 years, I'd stopped filmmaking, I was just podcasting. I was like, all right, man, I'll try to make a movie again. But I wasn't desperate, here's my fucking 5-step plan. All I did was push whimsy. It's like what we've been doing for the last 3 years. Don't make these solid fucking plans where you put your eggs in one basket, you get disappointed if it don't work. We try to spin a lot of fucking plates and push whimsy every day. So with the walrus thing, on the end of the podcast, I said, look, I obviously love this idea. If you think this is a good idea, hashtag on Twitter, walrus yes. If you think it's stupid and you think I should pursue Clerks 3 instead, hashtag walrus no. And the next day, it was like thousands of walrus yes, and one walrus no, and the walrus no guy was like, I'm voting no just because I believe in the democratic process. But he was really a yes, and so at that point I was like, all right, I'll fucking write this. There are enough people that want to see this movie, and some people have been like, you let the internet tell you what to do? Fuck yes, all the time. I throw it out there for them, and some people are like, that's not a smart move, because like the internet being supportive to you on any project, especially a weird one, is like your friend at a party when you're drunk and you're like, I want to take my fucking dick out, and they're like, do it. So, naturally they were like, this could be amazing, because It's gonna be a walrus movie, or we get to watch him fucking implode. Either way, it's fucking win. So I started writing it, and every day it was about pushing whimsy. Like, I didn't fucking grandmaster plan some walrus epic. There were some bones based on that article and based on the podcast. We sat there building the bones of a whole ridiculous movie that was never meant to be made. But I was like, well, let's see if I can write it. I had all this Canadian history because I was working on this Hit Somebody hockey miniseries. I was like, some of these stories I can't put into this Canadian project, but maybe if I set this story in Canada, I can touch on all these creepy things I know. So I was thinking Canada is this, like, Canada is the Texas of North America. I know that doesn't make sense, but it's just this land of mystery to me where weird shit happens. And most people are like, oh, they're polite. I'm like, no, they're deadly. Canadians are, you gotta watch them and shit. So for me, I was like, I'm gonna build a movie about like the opposite of what every American says about Canadian. They're always like, oh, they're polite, and they say a boot and shit like that. And basically we begin like that. Our character, Justin Long, heading up to Canada is very like, oh, Canada's so sweet. And we turn it into a freak show and stuff. So I'm writing, and I was like, what would make me want to go back to a set? Because like I was done with that. And I made this movie, Red State. That was the last thing I did. This guy, Michael Parks, was in it. And this guy is like an acting fucking Yoda who's forgotten more about performance than I'll ever know in a lifetime. The only reason I ever got into movies is because I like acting. I don't like moving a camera around, which is why I never do it. I think that's kind of showy. I like other people doing it, but me, I don't know how to move a camera around. If I do it, it feels showy. What I like to do is hang a camera on you and have you say a bunch of make-pretend shit. And if you can do that for a few minutes without breaking, and I believe everything you say, like it's just coming off the top of your head, that's my favorite kind of movie. I love to showcase performance, because that's magic. I mean, yeah, you can do CG and stuff, Wonderful Worlds, Galaxy, Guardians of the Galaxy is an amazing fucking movie, full of performance, but also full of like gee whiz colors and stuff like that. And I applaud that kind of movie, but I'm interested in making a movie where I'm like, look at this, isn't that fucking impressive? This dude is pretending something else, and he's an adult. Like, that kind of shit interests me. So I wrote for Michael Parks. I said, what would bring me back to a set? I was like, maybe if I just wrote a movie where I can hang out and watch Michael Parks act all day, because you like that. That was fun. So I wrote that dude as like this old guy who's like, come to my house and shit, and then he's the dude that's gonna try to turn the other dude into a fucking walrus. So every day I just pushed a little whimsy, going like, it'd be fun if Michael Parks said this. I want to hear Michael Parks say the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. I want to hear him say like, you know, is man indeed a walrus at heart? All these weird fucking things. And so I wrote it, and I wrote the first 20 pages, and I showed it to my wife. My wife generally doesn't really like the shit I do. She's like, that's for little boys, Kevin. So I gave her the first 25 pages of this, and she was just like intrigued. She was like, where's it go? I was like, I have no fucking clue. I was like, but it's weird, right? She's like, I would like to see it finished. I was like, all right. So I went back and started finished. Sometimes you just need a pat on the back from the least likely person. And that was the least likely person. I almost didn't want to share it with her because she'd like be like, a fucking walrus movie? Now you really lost it. But instead, it was the opposite. She was just like, go, finish this, man. And I finished it. And then I was like, let me see if we can get some money. And it was all push and whimsy. It was never planned. It was all, let's see if we can. Let's see if we can. And then we wound up getting some money. And I was like, let's see if we can start shooting. Let's see if we can pull together a cast. We pulled together a cast. And before I knew it, literally 6 months after the moment we were sitting in that room in my house, having the conversation on that podcast, going, wouldn't it be fucked up if the movie was this? I was literally standing on a set going action, and there was Justin Long dressed up like a walrus. So, you know, for me, I was like, fuck it. I left movies, podcasting brought me back to it, but it was just because I had that same moment that I had with Clerks, where I was just like, nobody's gonna make this. If you want to see it, make it yourself.